Let's talk a little bit about authentication. What you're looking at here is a pretty typical home or small business network. So you've got your ISP out here and access to the internet and a wireless router. Now anybody who wants to get onto your network, all they have to do is know the password to your wireless router. This is when your guest comes over and says, hey, can I have the password to your network? And so you give them the password. And so everybody uses the same password. The problem is that this router doesn't know one person from another. All it knows is that they have the correct password. So it could be this person could do something illegal, for example, on your network, and you have full liability for that because it doesn't know one from another. Now in a business, a larger business, you might have something that looks like this. Here's the internet, and the internet comes in. Here's a router, and then the router goes to a switch. Now the switch in turn goes to what we call a AAA server. That should have a V in it. A AAA server here, and AAA server, also known as an 802.1x server or an authentication server, does some authenticating for us. So now anybody who logs on either through a wired device here or through a wireless device and an access point needs to know the logon for that company, their personal logon for that company, and the AAA server here will authenticate that person. And notice that these are no longer wireless routers. These are now access points. Access points just give you wireless access to a wired network. And notice they have their own SSID, that is to say network name here. But this network name is not the same as this network name. This is the Wi-Fi network, and this is the network, the froggy.local network. Here's the domain controller down here that allows us to have a single sign-on. But in this case, all of our authentication has been offloaded to a server up here. So now when these people log in, you notice it's not the same password. It's a different password in every situation. That's because they are logging on to this network AAA server or 802.1x server or authentication server, which now allows them access onto the network, and the domain controller from there will be responsible for what they can do on this network. Well, there is another way that we could do this. We could have a guest Wi-Fi and so this is just as an access point, and this is an access point, but notice they have two different names. This is guest-Wi-Fi. This is froggy_Wi-Fi. Two different SSIDs. So I've got two different wireless networks. Now these guys all log in to the wireless network with the same login. So you're sitting in the doctor's office and a sign on the wall says our guest Wi-Fi is, and then they give you the password for the guest Wi-Fi. And yet I can have my doctors here who are bringing their own devices log into this Wi-Fi access point, and then the AAA server here will allow them onto the network, and then they have access to this domain controller. Notice I have a firewall here because these guys do not have access to these, so I'm using this firewall to keep these guest people out, away from the authentication server or from my domain controller. However, I can allow them access out to the internet. Now in this case I've added something. I added this right here. Otherwise everything else is the same. What I've done is I've added a server that we call a captive portal. Now the captive portal says if a guest logs on with the password over here, they are redirected before they're allowed to the internet. They're redirected to this server. And this server, they have to put in a username and a password for an account that I have assigned to them before they are allowed out onto the internet. Now, it could be so little as just a page with an agree button at the bottom that says, I agree to these terms. I won't do anything illegal while I'm on your guest account. Or it could be that I have it set up so that they have they have to have an account that they have set up previously before they're allowed to get onto this internet. Now, they still have no access to the AAA server or to the domain controller, but this little, this is in a sense a AAA server as well, but this little server here allows them then onto the network after they've proven they are who they say they are, or at least acknowledged that they aren't going to do anything that they're not supposed to do. So these are various ways that we can log on and authenticate. However, there are many, many variations of this. So I've just given you a few.